Hi, everybody. It's Bob Ost. Welcome to our Friday community gathering. This is Theater Resources Unlimited for those of you who don't know us. We are an arts services organization that's located here in New York. And our main goal is always from the start has been to help producers and to develop and support producers. Over the years, we've gone beyond producers and we help writers, we help artists, we help actors and designers and everybody else. But the main thing that we do is we try to keep everybody focused on the business side of theater. I myself, I'm an artist, I'm a writer, but I respect the business. And I always tell people that it's really useful to know about the business you're in if you want to negotiate and be successful in it. Um, so we've been doing these community gatherings now for, oh, I think we're at 237 consecutive weeks now. I started it because of uh, shutdown in 2021, 2020, April 17th, actually. I started it because we were in shutdown and nobody knew what to do with ourselves. And I didn't know what to do with myself. I was basically planning on just hiding under the covers and not coming out until it was over. At that time, I thought it would be over in at least like 3 or 4 weeks. I don't think I would have been lasting with covers over my face for 4.5 years, though. So we started this as a community service, and lo and behold, I opened up a Zoom room and I opened it, and people came. Um, Not only from New York, but from all over the world. We actually have somebody in the room today from Australia. We have people from all over the country, West Coast, Texas. We're well represented all around the United States, and this is something that was a surprise to me because I thought we're just a humble little New York, excuse me, a humble little New York arts organization. But suddenly we have a global community, and I couldn't be prouder and couldn't be happier about it. Um, I will add support, surprised, but I am certainly pleased. So our conversations started out 4.5 years ago, talking about creating during a pandemic and how to be creative and how to survive it all. But now we're back to we're back to a normal world. I mean, I say that with hesitation because I have lots of friends who still are getting COVID, and things are certainly different than they were pre-COVID. But at least it's something that we're a little bit more familiar with and a little bit more able to navigate. Um, so our conversations are becoming just normal conversations about theater. And one of the things I like to do is I like to bring in people that I know, um, or people that I know of in theater, and have them talk about what it's like to be in theater. We talk to theater companies. We've talked about AI a couple times. We've talked about it, just about anything. Today we're going to be meeting somebody who is very, very crucial in the history of True. Um, this is Michael Alden, who is going to have to turn on his camera soon, or I'll never be able to bring him on. This is Michael Alden, who was on the True board for many, many years, and he was one of the teachers of the producer development and mentorship class that we give to young professionals and aspiring professionals and even old professionals. Anybody who wants to learn about theater, they're always invited to come take our courses. Michael also is notable for the fact that he is probably one of the reasons why we now have two different courses in producer development. One is a foundations course and one is a master class. Michael and another fellow who's with us today, Patrick Blake, who sort of co-taught the program with Patricia Klausner, convinced me that we could do two different classes. He will tell you, in fact, I'm going to bring him on so he can tell you. He will tell you how resistant I was to this. Um, so, Michael, welcome aboard. Do
Well,
you,
thank
do you
you very
remember?
much.
Do you remember how much trouble I gave you about branching into two classes?
Well, yeah, I mean, I totally remember that it was like, yeah, because you sourced something that was sort of always in your visual control, and we were suggesting that we were going to take it into another room and you wouldn't be there. And it was heck, how could you know that it was true to true?
Oh, I wasn't worried about you guys. I had trusted you guys. What I was concerned about was being able to fill two classes. That was what was terrifying me. But as it turned out, we've been filling them for all these
Good,
years now.
good,
And
good, good.
then Jane Dubin, who's in the room today, Jane Dubin decided, oh, let's do 2 semesters. And I said, I'm barely filling 1 semester. So basically, the lesson for me is just let it happen and see if it works. And everything's been working. So we now have 2 semesters of foundations and 2 semesters of masterclass, Michael. So look what you did to me.
Yes, it's all my fault. I'm sorry. Hey, RK. Yes, Michael Alden Sr. Thank you, Patrick. I will float up and pick you up if you need it. I will absolutely bring the paddle and get you out of there if it gets worse. And
Oh yeah, we're talking right now about the weather in
oh yeah, yeah, they
California.
got the weather bomb up there.
Yeah. So one of Patrick, who I mentioned earlier, Patrick Blake, is in San Francisco, and he's got the weather bomb. I mean, it's flood warnings, flash flood warnings.
Yep.
They're changing San Francisco. They're going to call it flash flood warnings. So Michael,
Yes.
um, many changes since the last time I saw you, and if I haven't told you before, let me say it publicly how grateful I am for having had you in my life and in True, and for all the work that you did that helped really helped True to grow. It really did help True to grow.
Well,
Um,
thank you. And I think I've told you, but I will repeat it publicly as well. Post 2008, and for me personally, as an independent producer, the disappearance of everyone that was supporting my works almost because of the Bertie Madoff situation, and sort of trying to come back and refinding our footing in independent theater and film, and reminding us of our own value, which is kind of hard when things get ripped out from under you. It's hard to like see the forest for the trees because you're sort of grasping, and having the opportunity of being a part of True and having you generously allow me to lead some of it, put me back on my own 2 feet in a very strong way. So thank you for that.
well, you're welcome, and I appreciate you saying that. I mean, I am okay. I'm humbled. So let's move on. Let's move on to you and your background because you weren't always a theater producer. You started off in film, didn't you?
I started off back in the misty eons of time as an actor. I had fully intended to be the next Dick Van Dyke, which I'm very glad I did not go that route because there's still a Dick Van Dyke. But
And who'd have thought it? Who'd have thought
who
it
would have
all this
thunk?
time?
Who would have thunk? And just, I did the cater waiter, every job you could imagine, and I always did it under the idea that it would be a great Johnny Carson story. How I was discovered, running a train car or racing a car, and ended up doing some part-time work behind the scenes in an area of film and post-production, and it kind of stuck, and I worked my way up through the ranks of the editorial departments and ended up, as a studio executive, finishing films and then moving on from there into producing films. I had done that and thought that would be my entire career until I got an independently produced movie in New York that flew me from Los Angeles to do their post-production work. And that was in like 1990, 91. And the job was, I think, 9 weeks, and I was there 31 years. And during that time, I was invited to go see a play, and I got bit.
So
And
that's basically how you made the transition into theater. I
I
guess
was just in the audience, and at intermission, I turned to the guy that brought me to the play, and I said, "This has to be in a bigger theater." And there was a tap on my shoulder, and I looked over, and the guy behind me said, "I can make that happen." I said, "Why? Who are you?" He said, "I'm the author." He introduced me at the end of the show to the general manager. I said, "What do I have to do to produce this play?" She said, "Bring me $400,000." So
and the
this
head
will
of
happen. Everyone in the room, this will happen to you at least once, but probably only once. And I went back to the studio, and it was a emotionally and community oriented, timely play. And I just went from editor to editor to editor and said, "Give me $8,500." And they did.
Can you tell us what the show was?
Sure, the last session.
Oh, it was the last session. Of course, I should have known that.
And
So that was Steve Shacklin behind you.
yeah, and that no, Jim Brochu, but
Jim
yeah,
Brochu, okay.
Jim Steve Shacklin at that moment wasn't physically able to be behind me. Um,
Got it.
but gratefully that all those serendipitous things between art and commerce came together. And although we were producing the play in honor of a man we thought that was going to be gone before the formal opening night, that was 30 years ago, and he's still here. So
It's actually quite a story in of itself. It is it's a very powerful story. And yes, the fact that Stephen is here is a miracle, and we're all grateful for it. Um, so so you basically were thrown into this. I mean, you didn't go off and study how to become a producer. You basically they said we need this money, and you went and started asking for money. This is a good lesson for everybody. You have to just you ask. You can't get it if you don't ask, right?
look, I say the same thing. I've been saying it for decades. I totally believe this to be true, than truer than true than true. You already know everybody you need to know to make something happen. You just have to keep talking about what you're doing until that person that you already know says, "Hey, I know somebody."
So, which is also that was also the Randall Reagan used to talk about
Yes,
that as
absolutely.
well.
We're very,
Yeah.
very, very similar in the way that we operate.
So let me ask you this: what were the things? What do you know now that you wish you had known when you first started and you first did the last session? Would you have done anything different if
Well,
you know?
what I'm aware of now that I wasn't aware of then is I can say no. But
Well, to talk about that because there are people in here who are aspiring
no, it's
producers.
important. You talked about kind of being thrown into it. I mean, all the way back to, being with True. My entire life is it was founded on ups. I mean, I was an emancipated minor. I was in Hollywood. I was a cater waiter. I was going to be an actor, and then all of a sudden, I got this job that paid me every week if I could figure out what post production was, and I did eventually. I was with the studio for 7 years. And the same thing with both producing film and in producing plays. Listening, obviously, super important, and the kindness of strangers. Very important to suss out who that person in the room that just really cares about being in the room with you and it doesn't have their own agenda. And the general manager that was managing and co-producing the last session, the opening preview, I came out, I was so excited. We had a full house and everybody was there, and I came down during intermission, and Nancy, the general manager's in the box office, and reams of computer paper are coming out. I said, "What are you doing?"
Was that Nancy Gibbs?
It is
No,
Nancy Gibbs, and
I just
she,
saw her for the first time on Sunday in like years.
oh,
Go
and
on, go on, go on.
that's okay. And she said, "I said, what are you doing?" She said, "I'm looking at the gross weekly box office." And I said, "What's that?" And she came out of the box office and took me by the hand and sat me on the stairs. And she goes, "Honey, I know this is going to sound strange, but you're also supposed to make money doing this." um, which
I
which
think
has
I
which has passed me by many a time. But I was so excited about expressing and doing the art that I wasn't sure of the business. And because, as I said, the kindness of strangers, both in my accidental film career and in theater, somebody took me by the hand and said, "Look, I will show you what this is that you're doing and show you how you can do it better."
um, let me add my spotlight again. Okay, so here I am. I'm back. I gave you the full screen for
Oh
all
yeah,
that.
I'm looking at myself. Yeah, I don't need to do that.
But for the YouTube aesthetic, it
Okay,
works.
great.
It works.
Understood.
Okay. I have a couple questions. I've got so many questions. Let me start with um, what, if anything, did you learn in the film business that was really useful for you when you made the switch and you started producing Last Session?
Listening.
Okay.
I mean,
So
that would be key. I think that especially, as a youngster, as a wannabe or on a trajectory to be an actor, you do find yourself talking about yourself a lot because you want to make sure that you either rise above or are noticed by that person that you want to notice you. And the value of listening became one of the more key components. And I tell the story I got invited to a dinner party with the top personal manager in Hollywood in the 70s. And I was like, oh my gosh. I mean, this guy was going to manage me. It was going to be the beginning of this huge career. And he would say something, and I would say, well, I know that. And he would say something else. And I said, well, yeah, no, I already know that. And I know this and I know that. And I knew the other thing. And I knew everything he brought up. I was sure to make sure that he understood. I already knew that. And at the end of our meeting, he said, I can't represent you. And I said, why? And he said, I represent actors. Actors get their picture in the paper, they're seen on the medium that they're performing in, they get a credit at the end of the film or at the beginning if they're lucky. And as a manager, all I get is the fact that I knew something that they needed that made them famous. And you don't need anything from me. And I realized that I was 20 years old, and I remembered if I just sat there and listened to him, there would have been a different outcome. And I've applied that to pretty much everything I do. Like if I'm lead on a play or a musical, I will come in on Tuesday, usually the first performance of the week, half hour before half hour, and I will sit on the stage, and you can come out and say anything you want to me, with no recourse, no judgment, no. You can just, if there's something going on, you can let me know. And it was because I didn't know to do it any differently. I didn't realize that the division between producers and performers, maybe even still today, is a separation of church and state. They don't communicate to each other than in the work that they're doing on the stage. And that communication can really change sales of a ticket, the success of a show, just because you're remembering that everybody's a human being.
I always am fearful, have always been fearful since I started True, that the producer and the writer were on opposite sides of the equation, and I've been trying to get people to talk to each other for 32 years. I think that it's crucial that a producer and a writer be able to talk to each other and communicate. Um, the other there's so much I want to ask you. You left New York and you went to LA, and are you planning on producing any more for theater, or not planning? But
you did zero research on me. See how you are.
I did. I read your website.
So no, I am absolutely, so pre-COVID. I'm kidding with you, Bob.
Okay.
You remember me. If I don't give you a hard time, it's not me.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Pinch myself. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Pre-COVID, I started putting together a company called Streamline Theater Works, and the inspiration behind it was to develop new works, but solely to have them digitally captured in front of a live audience. My reasoning behind it is because unless you have Meryl Streep or an incredible amount of money, getting your show to Broadway is a long, if not improbable journey. There's just not enough real estate, and it's gotten way too expensive. But the negative for the producers, oh my gosh, it's so hard for me to produce on Broadway. But think about the negative to the writer. How long is it going to take before their voice gets heard, or is it extinguished because there's not an opportunity? And by taking, which I did, a $14 million musical and capturing it for $400,000, we gave that author, that composer, a platform to present their work, which after we did got picked up by MTI for publishing. So we never graced the stage. We never went out to Broadway. We didn't go on the road. It is a digitally captured musical that is represented by a prestigious publishing company and available, for production worldwide. It was initially intended to be in partnership with universities, because I am doggedly determined that television, film, theater, writing, directing, that all those departments talk to each other. And with rare exception, they're all vying for the same donor dollar. So they compete rather than partner. And that partnership is so valuable, so that when you create your posse outside the world of university, people from all walks of the industry. It increases your reach. And I want in the next decade for students to go, well, should we put it on stage or should we digitally capture it? And to answer your question, so I'm working at the Claremont Colleges here in Southern California. I just produced a concert for an arts fund for kids, and now I'm directing a piece on. The bottom line of what the piece is about, it was written by a teacher, but it's being theatricalized. What is it about human beings that feels that they have more power or more value when they displace others from their land? What is it about our world where we just don't want you to deserve to live on your land? And we've gotten to the point, especially in the United States, where when you say indigenous, we think Indian. But the reality is we're all indigenous from somewhere. And if I can inspire you to tell your story, then it equals the playing field.
Um, I just wanted to mention to everybody that this isn't like the first time that you've become socially aware in your work. A lot of what you've produced over the years has been um, things that are meant to have the audience look at things in a new way. Um, Whether it was Disgraced or whether it was the King's Speech. Talk a little bit about what has your mission been as a producer? Because I don't know whether you've ever stated it or not, but I think that if I look at your work, it's always been about things that matter, even Bad Boy.
Well, no, I mean, especially, I mean, I would love in a different world to revive that because if you look at the world of children on the spectrum and how misunderstood they are, that way I knew that then because my family was involved in mental health, both as instructors and at the effect of it, but that's another story. And, and but Bat Boy really does represent being looked at differently, because you don't toe the same line as everybody else in your community. But
Also, the other is the thing that we're kind of dealing with all the time. The other.
yeah, I mean, you were
Well,
saying, well,
let me just say you started your whole career with a musical about a composer with AIDS. I
yeah,
mean, you're you've never you have done. I'm sure you've done things that one could call frivolous, but I can't think of any. I think.
you haven't seen my last three horror films, but
Oh, well, that's different. That's movies.
but to your point, and it's specifically to your question, initially, you going in as a producer would drive to is hopefully paying your rent, and I know that you can relate to that part of it. But I have not yet been able to see, to go 100% through and produce something I'm not passionate about. And I know a lot of people that can put all the bells and whistles together and just go, yeah, we can make this happen. And they have the right reach and they have the right actors and they have the right amount of money. But if it doesn't, it's got to make me feel like some kid's going to do what I did when I was a little kid. I'm going to see something and go, oh, I'm not so different, or I'm totally acceptable, or I can do that.
You do work with the stuttering organization. I can't think what it's called, but
Yeah,
you've been doing work.
Stuttering Association for the Young, which again came out of, you don't know, sometimes I didn't do the King's Speech because I had an altruistic idea that I was going to, solve the problems of communication for people that had challenges with it. In fact, I didn't even understand the depth of that malady and the depth of the effect of not being able to speak. I theatricalized it. I was able to be a part of it, but it wasn't until Taro Alexander, the artistic director of Say, asked if David Seidler, our author, would consider being honored in their annual gala, which is their fundraiser. And I went, and an 8-year-old boy opened it, and he spent 7 or 8 minutes saying good evening. And I was in tears. And we decided to do the documentary, My Beautiful Stutter. And in doing that, I got to meet children and realize how difficult it is for them to trust that they won't be made fun of or that they won't be rushed. And what an honor it is when they do trust you and they sit down and they communicate.
So I think we're coming close to answering some of the questions in the title of this conversation, which is why am I a producer What did I call it? Good Lord. You're actually giving us a really good sense of why you produce. How to be a good producer and why do I do it? So I want to go to both of those things. I want to talk about what do you think it takes to be a good producer. I'd like to also make sure that you can, in some way, let us understand the difference in producing between film and stage, and to either cut it even slice it even thinner. I'd like you to talk about off Broadway and Broadway. You've produced both, and the let's start with that. Broadway and off Broadway, when you were doing it, um, they were both hard in different ways. And can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh, I'm coming from a place post COVID where realizations about the kind of the community of passionate people that I thought were an entire community of passionate people aren't altogether all that compassionate, and I think that, what I saw, if I'm going to start now and then go back, is the survival mode that people go into when they're challenged. And, during COVID, I was in the process of moving the King's Speech onto Broadway. We were going to load into Hartford when it happened. And I came up with 3 or 4 different opportunities to either open at 30%. And I talked to FIT about doing mannequins in period costumes with QR codes so that you could read about Anne Boleyn or Henry VIII, and we'd have hawkers in the hallways, with the ice cream so that you didn't have to get up to go to the concession. And I couldn't eat, that was one of 3. And it became more about real estate and protecting the real estate. And you have to do that, I guess. But it really surprised me. And I don't know where to take that part of the conversation. I was a little disheartened about it. As far as Broadway or off Broadway, they're equally difficult. The value for me in putting a show on Broadway is you have more money, and where you're so challenged off Broadway is it costs, prior to massive social media and influencers, it had cost almost as much to promote an off Broadway show as it does a Broadway show. If you look at, given how many seats you have, and that's tough because you don't have a deep well off Broadway. You get your show up and maybe, if you're lucky, you have a couple weeks of running costs in the bank, and then that's it. So in a world where especially nowadays, where it takes, if you don't have Meryl Streep, when it takes weeks, if not months, to establish yourself, it's very hard off Broadway the last 6 months to be discovered. You kind of have to hit it out of the park right away. You can afford somewhat of the wait. And I'd like to find out, exactly why or what they saw with the Forest for the Trees. But if you look at Tammy Faye, I was very surprised, at closing so quickly. That's like the old days, like 100 years ago. So I would say that financially speaking, with marketing, that's probably the bigger challenge.
So uh, I don't like to say this, but off Broadway has become pretty hard to make a go of. I think there's still some things that people could point at and say these are successful. How did you gauge success when you were producing off Broadway? Because sometimes like you're saying, you couldn't keep it running as long as it needed to in order to be financially successful. Uh,
Respect,
and talk about some of the specific shows that you produced also.
but I mean, respecting my investors and their belief. Again, when you pitch a show, it's ephemeral. You're pitching air. It's very important that I feel for myself and others. I mean, I still wake up with that sweat of, I've got different projects in different places of development, some of which have been in development for a number of years, that have other people's money behind. And so that always is in the forefront because that's the business side of it. In answer to your question about me as a producer, all of my projects have been successful because I got them on stage. So, I mean, to me, that it is so hard to get a show up. And if you can open the door and you can make your previews and get an opening night, then I have succeeded. I've told my story. Would I like to tell it to more people? And when doing so, make more money? Absolutely. Would I like to, have my, all my investors and the people that have, put their blood, sweat, and tears in it benefit more than an opening night party? Always. Always, always, always. But I'm not alone. This is where Randall Ray comes in. We are not lone voices in that agita that we feel because there's money behind it, because it's not behind the show, it's behind you.
Oh, that yeah. Let's clarify
They're
that.
investing in you.
Yeah, let everybody know that. I mean, that's important. You as a producer, when you're asking for money, remember that people are investing in you and not just the show. Um, I don't think people remember that or think about that very much.
You forget about it, and then um, it's easy for people to forget about it. And I think because, for me, because I lead with emotion first, somebody will say, well, what do you think went wrong? And what I hear is, what did you do wrong? And that never goes away. I've been around a long time and that just doesn't go away. You still question yourself because you forget that it's not like building an Apple phone. You're creating something that didn't exist before. And you're using as much art and talent as you had. And hopefully, I will digress for a moment and tell you the value of listening. I think there's 38 producers on Come From Away, and the lead producers of that play, that I am not a lead producer, included every single one of us at every single meeting. And we're able to manage those meetings in a way that you when you had something to contribute, it got done. I love to market and to partner with, other outside companies, and they gave me the platform to do that, but they listen, and that show's still on the road.
Let's talk about the prestige pieces because you had prestige pieces like Great Gardens, the Bridge and Tunnel. I mean, there were things that you brought to New York, brought to the stage that I think were very valuable in many ways. I don't know. I do not know sitting here whether they made money or broke even or anything, but they were important pieces. Can you talk about how you pick the pieces that you produce?
Well, some of the times they picked me. I mean, quite respectfully, I got a phone call from, well, who Eric Falkenstein, who had seen a show off Broadway that was being co-produced by Meryl Streep. And he called me and he said, did you know Meryl Streep's like co-producing a play? And I was like, I didn't. He goes, well, we should go look at that. So we went to see it and we talked to the Culture Project, and they said, look, all we need is $100,000.
This is for Bridge and Tunnel?
This is at the Culture Project.
Oh, okay.
We went to the reading or whatever it was, the preview, and then he said, they said, well, we just need $100,000. And Eric said, can you split that with me? Can we go make that happen? I was like, sure. So we did. And so this is a true story. We're going to be public, so I hope it's not embarrassing. It's so many years ago. So we do that. I get so excited. We go to the opening night at the Culture Project. We're sitting center. Meryl Streep's in the house. It's very exciting. All the producers, her agents are there and everything. And I leaned over to Eric and I said, so is the play good? And he said, haven't you seen it? And I said, no, have you seen it? And he went, no. And we just sat there and we just kind of went way down in our chair. And then Sarah Jones came out and knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, she certainly did.
Yeah, but it was just
she knocked it all the way to a Tony Award.
But that was also a very big learning experience. I was just kind of going on my producing partner going, this is going to be a great show. I said, oh, good. Okay, I'll do it. It'll be great. And I've worked with Meryl Streep before. This will be really wonderful.
Just to the room, don't do it that way.
Don't do. Oh my God, no. That was first.
See the show.
Alyssa wasn't my eighth.
It was what?
It wasn't my eighth show. It was my first Broadway show. So
Yeah, that's true.
And then we moved it to Broadway.
Did you partner with Randall on anything besides Grey Gardens? Did you partner with him? That was it. I probably met you through Randall. Does that seem right? well, anyway, just Randall, just for those of you who don't know, was a wonderful man and a wonderful producer, and we lost him.
All
It
too soon
just
and for really shitty reasons. Excuse my
for
language.
really shitty reasons. Yes, exactly. So let me mute myself for a second. Sorry. Um, there we go. Okay. So I don't know why people don't know not to call me during this. I don't understand it. Did you hear the phone ring?
No.
Oh, thank God. All right. So um, there's a lot of pieces of conversation I want to get back to. One of the things I want to talk about is the what you sort of said in passing about an entire way of developing new musicals that really didn't exist um, 10 years ago. I won't even say pre-COVID because you and Tom Pullum were already um, thinking in terms of filmed ways of development. I think it was pre-COVID when you did. Was it Paul's show that you're talking about? Paul Gordon's?
Yeah, so I had created a relationship with David Bell, who was head of theater at Northwestern at the time. And so the idea was is we were going to do a 3-week rehearsal and do 1 week of performances at Northwestern, where Northwestern could invite donors, possible sponsors, students that they were trying to woo. But it was going to also allow me to bring in bigger names because it was a very short commitment. So you would be able to do a full quote unquote Broadway show in and out in 4 weeks and still get a piece of the pie. So the way that we set this up is everyone involved in the digital capture participates financially for the life of the project with the producer. And that's never done. There's not an actor on Broadway that gets a residual if somebody else does the play.
So tell us which piece you're talking about. Was
It's
this
called Estella
Emma?
Scrooge.
Oh, are you
And
talking about Estella Scrooge?
yeah,
So I was right in bringing Tom Pullum into the
yes. And
conversation.
so what happened was COVID hit, and our DP, who's a genius, um, said, I think I can figure out a way to film this during COVID, one actor at a time. And in his small studio, he just everything went to a green screen. And he sent out requests for measurements of how tall you are, how tall, the distance between your brow and the top of your head, the width of your eyes. And he created little ski masks, goggles on dummies that the shine, the reflection of the ski mask was where Carolee Carmello or Betsy Wolfe or Danny Burstein's eyes. And you went in and did your performance, whether it be musical or dancing or a dramatic scene, with a mannequin. And unless you really don't notice, it's not a cartoon, it's not a movie, it's a hybrid. But we were able to successfully during COVID produce a Broadway musical that is out there in the ether and being represented by publishers, and nobody got sick.
Has anybody done a live stage production of it yet?
Going back to Southern California in theater, I'm on the board of directors of Youth Theater Works, which is 8 to 18 kids. Most of them are on the spectrum, and their first professional theater where they actually had a real space. John Caird and Paul Gordon gave them the premiere rights. And so it was great. So Estella Scrooge was actually presented by kids first. And we're just opening this week on the Theater Channel in the UK. And I think that what got in the way, again, publicity, marketing, and advertising dollars, on Amazon Prime, if you watch Estella, there's 24 actors in it. And that is not cost effective for a regional theater, but it was written for 12. And so we're just getting the word out there that
Oh,
yeah,
so
people said looked at the movie. This was our own idiotic. We sent the movie to everybody, but we didn't send a little disclaimer saying this is written for 12 or 13 people.
Oh, well, that's great. That's amazing. If people in the room don't know this, we did Christmas parties with a viewing party for Estella Scrooge in 2020 and 2021. Was it with those 2 years? I think. And I thank you for thank you for that. Thank you for giving us something that was worth looking at, and was a break for people who were tired of talking heads and frames. So
Everybody did a good job, and it was just, I mean, Danny Burstein was losing his wife within days or not weeks of that period, and he'd been locked away in the house, and he plays Scrooge, and all of his stuff he did in one day. But we could all come in on Zoom and watch the performances, and just how healing it is to perform, how healing it is to be around arts. When things are going tough in your life, and it was the energy that came from him.
well, let's just draw an underline on that one. When things are going tough in our lives, the arts really matter. And I keep telling people this, and I will continue telling them. Right now, more than ever, all of us in this room, probably the people looking in, we need the arts, and we need to be able to create, and we need to be able to express our ideas. For now, as long as we can.
So inspired by the following, you go to Europe and you hear a story about Giuseppe in Italy who laid the cornerstone of a church. And his great, 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 great grandson put the steeple on 350, 400 years later. Giuseppe laid the groundwork, but he never saw the church. And we, especially in the United States of America, have lost sight of the value of time. We live in a wrinkle cream society. If it doesn't work in 10 days, we throw it out. And if we do not start looking and not be too precious about if a school has a theater department, or if a child gets to do a musical, or it's really important that they can take dance lessons. In reality, and as far as the world as a whole, it's not as important as the idea that art and education should be part of a curriculum. And what I'm doing here in Southern California, even though it will not happen in my lifetime, is whether you want to be a rocket scientist or a social worker or a teacher or an engineer, you have to take an art and education class. I have friends that are working at Howard University, and they're getting paid to teach Howard University students who have already created what should be successful IPs how to sell their own IPs, because they don't know how to talk about it. So we need to, I believe, get away from the fact of fighting, the National Arts Association for more money, sending Jane Alexander down to demand, that we, give more funding for the arts. I think you have to go in subliminally. We have to start talking and getting colleges proud that they're producing students and graduates who can talk to each other. And that will bleed into art. I one more digression before we move on. I'm doing a show for the colleges on, as I said earlier, displacing people from their indigenous land. And the woman who's our stage manager, I said, "So what's your day job right now?" And she said, "I teach elementary school." I said, "What do you teach in elementary school?" She said, "Technical theater." She goes, "Not easy, but it's interesting watching the kids try to figure out what I'm talking about."
Um, I have 100 more questions, but Owen, be the voice of God. Tell us, what are the questions from the room?
Sure thing. First question from Lee Roscoe asks Michael if he's still producing digitally, and if so, how can we pitch him?
MichaelAldenProductions.com. And yes, I'm developing right now. And again, too, moving here to the desert, which will be a whole other conversation. Just the space, the air, the calmness of the surrounding. Yeah, I'm doing a lot of creating. I directed my first cabaret, got nominated for it. And I'm developing, which will be digital, I'm developing a one-woman show on Phyllis Diller, the comedian. And that will be done in front of a live audience, but the calling card to have it produced around the world will be digital.
I got to tell you, going from becoming Dr. Ruth to Phyllis Diller is not a big leap, is it?
Yeah, but then, again, Phyllis, the reason is because, and I've done this in other areas and for other reasons, but this woman did not get her due. Forget breaking the glass ceiling for female comedians. She had 6 kids. She had 3 on the spectrum, 1 schizophrenic. Her husband beat her. She was a classical pianist. When she was accepted as one of the top comedians, they wouldn't let her in the Friars Club because she was a woman. So she went and dragged with a mustache. She posed for Playboy. I mean, the woman was a trendsetter, and her philosophy was, "You believe no matter what. I believe, and I want to tell her story." And she's just awesome, and that will be digital.
That will be digital.
Yeah, and
Okay.
the other value to that to the digital world is because you can get Meryl Streep. You can get somebody to come in and spend 3 or 4 weeks. That wouldn't be 2 or 3 years. I mean, if you look at the commitment Audra McDonald's had to make to do Gypsy, and it's great and it's wonderful, and people will buy tickets to see her, but that's a huge commitment, in the third act of her life. And there's other people that aren't willing to do that, not willing to make that time commitment, but they still want to do that kind of performance.
Rather than respond, I'm going to ask Owen for the next question.
Next question is from Milla. What part did trying Broadway shows out in cabaret clubs have on Broadway shows?
Or did they do it?
Yeah, I haven't ever developed on a cabaret show for Broadway. The cabaret show that I produced and directed was a little smile here. So it was called Monday Monday, inspired by a friend who needed to have this in his 70s. And he toured with Mama Cass Elliot and her original solo tour. And he was the backup singer that made her the ham sandwich.
Oh,
Yeah, and so we told his whole story about his career, with the 11 o'clock moment being that, and what people did to distract people from the real reasons that she died. And so it was interesting to do it in a cabaret world. So it was kind of theatrical, but I don't plan on moving it out of the cabaret.
just for the room, because we've talked about developing works through cabaret. I I think that the scope of Broadway as an end goal is a little big to start in a cabaret room, but I think cabaret, like nonsense, was developed in cabaret, but I think smaller pieces maybe. I
Well,
don't know. There's no right or wrong. What?
what was the Hugh Jackman, Daniel Craig Broadway, the two-hander?
Steady Rain.
Right, that was developed in a cabaret in Chicago.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, not with them.
Right. That's when I think that must be when Cheryl Weisenfeld originally found it because she was the
But
original.
and there's to my point, and to answer the question about developing cabaret, you can develop in cabaret as long as you can get Daniel Craig and Hugh Jackman to take the roles to Broadway.
It's a good trick. Um, oh, and did we answer Milla's question? I guess we did. Others?
Sure. From Gina, Michael, has Southern California shaped your sensibilities or worldview regarding theater? If so, how?
Thank you. Yes, excellent question. Yes, it has, because it reminds me. You get a little caught up when you're. Yeah, I entered the Broadway community in 1990, and you have this insular group of people that you kind of know and you grow with, and you go to Sardi's and you talk about art and you go to rehearsals and other people's previews, and here you meet the audience. I mean, I'm living in Palm Springs, California, so I am a destination for worldwide travelers. And there is, since COVID, an enormous amount of art here because an enormous amount of artists have relocated here. So it has changed my view about not that ever it was lessened, but the value of the audience is not equated to where they're going to see the piece of theater. And it isn't about, Broadway should never be now considered a destination. If you're lucky, it should be a stop. And there are audiences hungry for community, which obviously, in addition to being entertained, you walk into a theater and you're in a community, you're in a church.
I just want to say that I agree with you, but I'm not sure that everybody's playing the game that way. People are still attached to Broadway as being the destination.
I understand.
It's very hard.
I'm just sharing my opinion.
Yeah.
My
I
opinion,
agree. I agree with
and
you.
Nancy Gibbs. Look, in the world of commerce, in the world of producing for money, we refuse to look at Broadway as a short-term engagement. Most other theater cities like London and stuff, if you can't make your money back in 16 weeks, they don't do the show. There's a plan in place, and unless something horribly happens, most of their shows break even.
That's another interesting conversation. Why more shows break even in London than they do in New York?
Because there's a plan. Where there's no plan. We are so young in America. It's like, oh, come on, let's go put on a show. It's going to be great. Everyone's going to love it. And you're opening out of town. It's not looking really good. Yeah, but we'll fix it in Broadway. No, it's not looking right. And everyone's afraid to say something. And there's a lot of money at stake.
Well, there have been exceptions to that, like when Fiddler on the Roof wasn't working until they found a opening number that made it work.
Okay. I'm not talking about 147 years ago. I'm talking
Okay.
about Broadway as it is now. And
Yeah, a lot of
say though, when you fight for change, sometimes you get it. So I did notice that we're finally investing producers as in association with or co in the credits rather than equating them to the lead producers. I was very proud of that.
I didn't even notice that happened, so I'm glad to hear it too.
Yeah, and they didn't say anything. I just started noticing it. If you look at IBDB, I'm like, this is nice. So I'm sorry, I just had to digress there. You know me.
Owen, back to you.
A couple of questions from John Ewing first. Michael, why do you think more Broadway and off-Broadway shows are not adapted into feature films?
I don't know how to actually why more of them aren't. I mean, that would just be based on interest, from commercial producers. I don't know if I have an answer as to why some do and some don't. I mean, you would think Wicked would have been a movie 20 years ago.
Well, it's here now.
It's here now.
The first half.
Are you kidding? Man, they played that right. So I don't know.
Okay, how about this one also from John?
John, I want to say something to John about that. John, not all shows will translate well into film. They're two different media, and basically, I think that this secret to success in that is rethinking a theater piece in film terms. Cabaret was a successful movie. It had very little to do with what the show was. It was rethought and reconceived. Chicago was a successful movie, and it was really rethought in cinematic terms. So basically, we need more producers who are visionaries who can see and imagine how a show could be adapted into a movie. I agree with you. I'd like to see more of that happen. Although I'd like to not see some of the things that have been made movies of. I'd like to unsee them sometimes, but it's a creative choice, and somebody has to be able to have the vision. It takes vision.
And again, Bob, too, if you're looking at, and I've said it tongue in cheek, like Barbie on Broadway, that's the financial challenge. That's why the Back to the Futures and everything, and that squeezes out, a brand new author that's written a 4-person play that's starring great theatrical actors that nobody's going to go see. I mean, even look, Disgraced won the Pulitzer Prize, was the top licensed show the second year after Broadway, and never made its money back.
Even with the licensing?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Well,
so that's a brilliant piece of theater that is so important then, and it's even more important now. And yeah, shocked.
Owens, put on your. I know you have John's second question, but also put on your radar that I know Sue Horowitz is raising her hand. So what's the second question from John?
I think we sort of got to it, but with A24, this is also from John, with A24 purchasing the Cherry Lane Theater last year and Lionsgate producing the Dirty Dancing musical on Broadway, do you think movie studios will be more active in producing shows on Broadway in the future?
Yes, and I think that they already are, and it would not surprise me in the next 2 decades if movie studios end up owning the theaters after the current guard are no longer in charge. Because it's like, for me, and again, too, I can be totally wrong, but my opinion is it's like the M&M store on Broadway. It's like that real estate is so outrageously expensive. I can't imagine that they can actually really pay for everything that they're paying for. But it's advertising. They're on Broadway. I mean, millions of people walk by that store. And so I really believe that movie theaters are going to realize the value of having their name and their product in live theaters and actually taking more films and making them into plays and owning all of it.
Oh, and we're going to move on. I just want to let the room know that.
Sorry to be depressing.
No, that's fine. I just want to let the room know that we don't really need to ask Michael whether he'll read your show plays. That you can handle that in another forum. I don't want Michael to be put on the spot over and over again. People are just like in the chat. It says, "Will he read my play? Will he read?" It's like, no, not that.
For every, I mean, look, I am always wanting to contribute as I can. I'm developing the Phyllis Diller thing. I've got a couple of films. I've written some stuff that Bob doesn't even know about yet that I'm working on diligently. Both the animated shorts and a couple of children's books. And that's sort of where my focus is right now. But if I can be supportive in any way, I'm just not developing other works right now. Now,
and does that leave any other
there are a couple.
questions?
Let's go to Sue, who's had her hand raised for a while.
Oh, great. I'm so thrilled that you're interested in Phyllis Diller. I interviewed Phyllis Diller for my book, Queens of Comedy.
Oh, great.
And I have the original recordings of my interview with Phyllis Diller, which have never been publicly released. So I have them at home.
Okay.
And Phyllis is a wonderful person. When I did the interview, she encouraged me. She sent me 4 books to encourage me. And she gave me her personal original oil painting, which hangs on my wall.
That's worth some money now.
That's who Phyllis Diller is. I would love to get in touch with you.
You have my email.
I do. I have michaelaldenproductions.com, but I don't believe I have your email.
Okay, you do, because you and I have quite a bit. We'll do that off.
We'll do that. But I mean, I really have this unique, amazing material.
That sounds awesome.
Phyllis Diller. Yep.
All right. I'm gonna take us back to True though, because thank you, Sue, because I don't want to miss out on any other questions.
Okay.
But that's awesome though. Thank you.
I'll try to reach each other.
All right, the last question I have is from Tita, who asks, many of the plays you have helped birth, and you have balanced the economics of theater with your compassion for fairness and service. Any thoughts about getting meaningful but not talky or blockbuster scripts with the power to strengthen our shared humanity into community venues that are not costly theaters?
Well, yes, but I wouldn't do it. What I would do is I would digitally capture it and send that out to both, regional and off regional theaters, as well as the publishers, and have other people produce the work using the digital capture as a framework for the story that we're trying to tell.
And I think Tita's reason for asking that, because I know her well, is we're all very concerned about freedom of expression. We're all very concerned right now about various of our freedoms being taken away from us. And we're always looking for things that we can do to keep our world from crumbling. I mean, I think we're a lot of I can't speak for everyone, and I said this at the benefit as well. I can't know what's in your heart. I can't know what your politics are and what your views are in politics. But I think we're all here and we're all together because we all love the arts and we all love what theater can do. So as a shared community, do you have any final word that you can give to us in terms of getting through what will likely be very difficult times for us coming forward?
Well, I mean, I'm not the sage as far as cities and politics, et cetera, but I do know for me, it's like really focusing on the fact, like I live in a condominium complex where there's 4 units that we face each other. And that's my community. My goal right now is to make sure I have everybody's phone number and that I ask how everybody is. If we just take care of our neighbor on the left and the right, That's as much as we can do as human beings. As far as the arts are concerned, I say bloom where you're planted. So we got people in Texas and Hawaii, in Australia. Yes, it's wonderful to think about going to Broadway, but what can you do with your art and your ability to communicate to the arts right where you are? I'm telling you that there will not be a greater production of Estella other than seeing this 14-year-old girl play her, with 60 kids on stage that were all under 18. I just did a concert to raise money for grants for children for arts programs. I brought back 30 alumni from my high school from the last 60 years, but the choir was all high school kids. I had 45 high school kids, and they got to spend 2 days with alumni that had graduated all the way back from 1968 and ask questions about art and performance and where they, and that's what will keep our world and our children safe. Well,
thank you, Michael. I see that there are more questions, though.
Kathleen has her hand up. I'd like to acknowledge that.
Kathleen. Unmute yourself.
Okay, there you go, Carol.
Hi. I'm directing an historical musical in its infancy, but we have had a few staged readings, and it's based on the Roosevelt and Whitney family. It's a big show, great story. You may have already answered my question because it sounds like its destination does not necessarily mean Broadway, even though it is a big Broadway show. Do you think it should be going, should it be in the filmed, as you were speaking of it, as a new way to present theater to the masses, or perhaps being done as a regional pieces?
First of all, there is no should, because if there was a should, I would have had more shows recouped. So I think you need to look at the piece and the number, and Bob and I, we talk about this all the time. If you have a huge cast, you've got a huge challenge.
Yes.
It's just huge. And so therefore, in this world, if you have a huge show, you need to go to a major city, to develop it. And you need to go to either a regional that has a lot of money, which is kind of none right now. There's maybe a couple that are still holding on, or you get a star. Unfortunately, the art takes second if you have a big show.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
I have an answer to Lee Roscoe's question. So where can we find a green screen, 3 cameras, digital studio with great post-production that won't cost a fortune? As good as I know is streaming musicals. Tom Pullum, he was the president of the True Board. He was on the board of directors. He's true through and through. And he doesn't have a 3-camera digital studio. He has an 8-camera. He has an 8-camera digital studio.
Well, oh yeah, right. But I'm saying they do have a studio, so
yeah.
Tom Holland, is that what you said?
Yeah. Streaming musicals, and they do straight plays as well. I mean, the name of the company and the first thing that we did together was Estella. So,
All right.
So there, is that Lee? Oh no, it's Kathleen. Hello, Kathleen.
No, I'm Lee. Thank you, and I do.
Oh, it was
I do
Lee. Okay.
I do know Tom, and I have talked to Tom and Stacia, so I will proceed with that. Thank you.
You're welcome. I never want to be a downer, but there's some realities out there that we're not gonna be able to overcome in the very near future.
And Lee, I can promise you that Tom will be as affordable as their studio can afford to be. I don't know what you consider affordable. There's another person. Okay, John Lant has a studio in New Jersey, and shoot me an email, and I will put you in touch with John Lant to ask him about his studio, because he has a probably a less sophisticated setup, but I'm sure it's 3-camera at least.
Thank you.
So I think I'm going to say thank you to Michael for being here with us. You can hang out a little bit if you're able to, and thank you to the community for being here and coming here every week. For goodness sake, appreciate it. And to those of you out there in YouTube land and podcast land, if you want to be in the room ask questions and be part of the conversation to the extent that we can do that, you are welcome to. I can make that happen. All you have to do is email me at trunltd@aol.com. That's trunltd@aol.com. And I will send you a Zoom link every week, and you can come be part of this. Next week, we're going to be doing a Thanksgiving special conversation. And we're just going to talk with my board, with members of my board who are theater producers and other theater people. Just get together as a community on Thanksgiving, the day after Thanksgiving, on Black Friday, and just talk about what we can and what we can't do, and looking at the positives as much as we can in terms of where we're heading right now as a country. The week after that, I've got. And you may remember that I was supposed to have Beowulf Boritt, the Tony-winning set designer, on the show, and he came down with laryngitis. He will be here. When is it? December 6th. So I hope you'll come. And on December 13th, I've got New York Assemblyman Robert Carroll, who's going to be here, and he's going to talk about some initiatives that he's been working on, and maybe other politicians are working on, that are meant to aid and support theater during these difficult times. In particular, we're going to talk about something that's on a bill that he's trying to get passed, that will give tax incentives to buildings when they convert from office space to residential. They have to have arts dedicated spaces as well. And we're going to in general talk about art and politics, what we can do, how much can we do, and how can we use our political power, our personal political power, to make things happen and change in the world. I'm not saying it's easy, but at least we can have a conversation about what we can and can't do. That's it. I hope you'll all join us, and I hope that you'll support True. We have a policy of letting everybody come for free if they need to. Some people, especially today, have been very gracious and have actually paid the usual fee to come and be part of this. If you want to support us, go to our website. Go to trudonate.com, trudonate.com, and give us a little support. It's the end of the year. It's going to be a tax-deductible donation, yada, yada, yada. We'd appreciate it, and we'd be very grateful for it. And that's it for tonight. Thank you, everybody.